Hey, welcome back. Hope you guys had a great week. Today I'm gonna present to you guys for scary stories from Reddit. If you are new to the channel and don't want to miss any crazy creepypasta stories, hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell notifications. Now with that out of the way, let's start with the stories. "60 years ago my life was ruined by an old necklace." By Lostinthevoiddd. I grew up in a rich suburb of Massachusetts in the late 50s. My father had a job as a lawyer, and he brought in a lot of money for the family, which me and my mom mostly spent on getting our nails and hair done, and going to fancy parties hosted at what is now known as the country club. We were living luxurious and I couldn't have been happier. Growing up rich as a little girl meant I had all the toys I wanted, all the beautiful hats and dresses that my peers longed for, I had. My mother and father never really got along, and he often complained about how my mother was spending the money he was bringing in. He brought up the fact that as the woman of the house, my mother should have been using the money he brought to clean and make him dinners. My mother never let up, and eventually when I was 14, my father hit his breaking point and kicked us out of the house. Going through the divorce, we lost all of our money and we were forced to move out of the rich town I had grown up in. My mother bought a house and moved us to a small beach town in Maine called Brock. The moment we stepped into the town, the entire atmosphere changed and my body was overcome by melancholy. The town was painted shades of gray and rain poured from the sky. A sense of gloom and sadness hung over the town, and even the kids my age were dull and acted as though the life had been completely drained out of them. My mother worked as a journalist for the local paper, and she was always busy trying to keep us afloat. I spent the whole summer on my own, on my old rusted bike that my mother bought for dirt cheap from some local store. I had no friends, and the only way I could enjoy my time, even a little bit, was to go to the library every day. I would always choose the same chair, the red armchair in the back right corner that smelled of must and mildew. I'd sit in that chair and draw every day from open to close, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Next to my chair there was a little door with caution tape all over it. Curiosity ate away at my brain like maggots, but I never opened the door. I never opened the door until August 4th, 1962. My mother and I had had a horrible fight the night before, which ended in me saying that I hated her and I hoped she'd die so I could live with my dad again. I never knew I'd regret saying that my entire life. The next morning I biked to the library as usual, and this time I decided I was going to open that door. The library was never busy, so it was almost too easy. When I pried the door open, I was greeted by a staircase and a low light glimmering at the end. I should have turned back there. I should have gone home and apologized to my mother, but I was a kid. Curiosity overcame me. I walked down the staircase and into the light. I was met with a room made entirely of cobblestone. It reeked of death, and the sadness I felt in that room was the strangest feeling of my life, and it still is to this day. It was like I couldn't even breathe. In the middle of the room was a huge golden chest, one that looked like it had been used by pirates sometime in history. Surrounding the chest were 4 statues, one of a crocodile, a wolf, and a bear. They were made of gold, pure gold. The 4th statue was bigger than all the rest, and as soon as I looked at it I felt strangely pulled towards it, like I couldn't escape the hold it had on me. It was of a symbol I knew all too well, the Grim Reaper. At the base of the statue held a small brass key. The key was used to unlock the chest, as I had suspected. Inside the chest was a note, and on top of the note laid a circular necklace with 4 symbols on it. One of a crocodile, of a wolf, of a bear and of a hatchet. The crocodile, lion and bear all had the word completed written on top of them, but the hatchet glowed gold and read uncompleted. I picked up the note from the bottom of the chest and read it. Even all these years later, I still remember exactly what it said. No one can complete the 4th level. No one can. We tried. We tried. We tried. We tried. We tried. I laughed a little to myself in disbelief. This had to have been some elaborate prank on me. I pressed down on the hatchet symbol. As soon as I pressed it, I knew this was not a prank. The room shook and glowed golden, and a huge figure rose up from inside the chest. I closed my eyes tight. I remember the feeling of fear that overtook me. I remember feeling each breath as it came and went, my heart thudding in my chest. The feeling of sadness I had felt before only growing bigger. Then it all went still. When I opened my eyes, I was at an empty beach. Golden sands under my feet, and the most beautiful water you've ever seen. Everything was so calm, I felt at peace. Ahead of me stood a tall man in all black, a mask covering his entire face and a crooked top hat on top of his head. He took his mask down, revealing only his eyes. They were yellow and beady, and they never blinked. I locked eyes with him and a booming voice sounded in my head. The final level. You must kill someone you love, and carry out 5 deaths for me. You will serve as my henchman, delivering death for me. When you are finished, you'll live here with me, in eternal peace. He held out a shimmering golden sword. Speak. I shook my head no, unable to speak, too scared to move. At that, he dragged his sword on the ground and slowly walked towards me. I conjured enough energy to move, and I turned to run. It's too late, your mother is already dead. You've already disrupted my sleep. If you ever wish to change your mind, you know where to find me. That was the last of his voice I heard in my head. The world around me morphed back into the room it once was, the cobblestone room full of coldness and sadness. I ran up the staircase. I frantically told the librarian to lock up the door once again. I told her to lock it good enough that no one will be able to re-enter. She had a puzzled expression on her face. She looked at me like I was crazy. "What door?" she asked me. I turned to look one more time, and the door was gone, but I could still feel it. I could still feel him. I started back for the exit. "Come again soon," the librarian said in a distorted voice, deep and scratchy. I ran like I've never ran before, all the way home. When I got inside, my mother was nowhere to be found. She was gone. There were no signs she ever even lived there at all. 60 years later I'm writing this, because I have finally made my decision. I never left the small town of Brock. I didn't stay by choice. I tried to leave many times, but I just can't. I'm tethered to this place. He keeps me here. I've never been happy since that day in August. I always feel the same feeling of melancholy I did when I was in that cobblestone room. I've felt it my whole life since that day. I had a husband. I got pregnant with him and had a stillbirth. We tried for children many other times, and they all ended the same way, miscarriage. After the 4th child, my husband killed himself. I tried to follow him, but I can't. I tried to kill myself on multiple occasions, but they never worked. He wants me alive. I've made my decision. I know there is no hope of a happy life for me. As soon as I publish this, I'm going to go. I'm going to go back to the library. I'm going to live in eternal peace. Because as he said, I know where to find him. I'm from a town where nothing grows. Gravesy_ writes. I'm from a town where nothing grows. not trees or crops or animals. There are no farms that border the outskirts, and the yards are plastered in fake grass because the dirt is completely barren. Even dandelions, who often make their homes in cracks and concrete jungles, can't take root here. The rivers don't flow and the lakes stand stagnant, and if I ever saw an animal, either domestic or wild, I might just have a heart attack. If you were to go back in time 10, 20, 100 years, you wouldn't be able to spot a single difference. The same businesses line the single street that makes up the entirety of downtown, and the same families live in the same houses they always have. No one ever comes and no one ever leaves. No mail or deliveries, no visitors, no travelers just passing through, yet the supermarket is always stocked and the flower shop always has freshly cut roses. But the worst part is that this state of stasis goes beyond the physicalities of the town. Even the people stagnate, frozen in time and frozen in mind. No one seems to notice that the day never turns to night or that their barren gardens never bloom. They think the same thing and say the same phrases and no one ever notices. The days blend together like an oversaturated watercolor painting. I'm not sure if it's been many days or just one long one. I can't pick out a single one from my memory, yet I can always remember everything I said and did, not because of the brilliance of my memory, but because I'm stuck in the same endless cycle as everyone else. Mrs. Lawrence walks the sidewalk in front of my house, a baby on her hip and another in her belly. She's been pregnant for as long as I've known her, and her son, little Bill, hasn't aged a day past 2 years old. I don't know why he's called Little Bill. As far as I can remember, there's never been a Big Bill to necessitate a nickname to differentiate them. "Wonderful day," she greets, with the tip of her oversized hat like always. She looks tired. I suppose it's the pregnancy. I take a long sip of my peppermint tea and lean forward in my rocking chair before I speak. "Yes, very," I reply for the 100th time. "How've you been?" It slips from my lips before I can think about it, before I can remind myself that I know the answer. I think it's a habit at this point. "Oh, this pregnancy will be the death of me." She gives me a mirthful smile that barely hides her exhaustion, the same smile she gives me every day. She should be here any day now, thank the Lord. Honestly, I think I'd be more surprised if any day now ever came. I can't remember when or how I got here, and when I think about it, my head hurts. For all I know, I could have always been here. Maybe I am wrong to question everything. After all, no one seems concerned but me. Maybe this is all there is. I think that's what scares me the most. But I found this phone. I don't know how I know what it is. I've never seen one before, I don't think, but I found it hidden in a box under my floorboards with a note that said to pay attention. And ever since I did, I noticed that this is a town where nothing ever grows. I don't know why I never noticed it before, but as soon as you look, it hits you all at once. And once you see it, you can't stay. I tried to leave. I walked and walked until my feet bled, until my body gave out and I fell to the hot sand and cried. I've walked the entire perimeter, crossed every bridge and traveled every road, but you can only get so far until. I sit in the old rocking chair on my porch, the same one that's always been there. A cup of my favorite tea sits on the table beside me, filling the air with the comforting aroma of peppermint. I hear the click-clack of Mrs. Lawrence's heeled shoes coming down the sidewalk. Wonderful day, her honeyed voice pierces my eardrums like a bullet. I clutch my teacup, feeling the hot ceramic burning my flesh. "Yes, very," I hear myself reply. She offers me a small smile as she continues on her way. Her back is to me when my mouth opens. The words fall out sounding hurried and frantic. "Don't you ever try to leave?" Her light footsteps stop, and she stands still for a moment, so long that I think maybe she didn't hear me. When she looks at me over her shoulder, her eyes are cold and distant, her perfectly painted lips are pulled into a tight line. Every damn day. If you like this story, follow the writer on Twitter at MiloGravesX. That's at MiloGravesX. It's Looking at Us by Panterium. A few summers back, me and my brother would go hiking out about where our father used to take us as children. It wasn't far from the cabin we stayed at. Since our father had passed, we seen no reason to let such a fond tradition die out. It was mid-July and we both had time off work, which was perfect. We took some fishing rods, a lunch, and a 6-pack of beers. We would go to the same place as always and fish. The hike was hell, but for memory's sake, we did it anyway. We sat by the river talking, smoking cigarettes and drinking our beers that afternoon, talking about how Dad would joke around and tell us stories of our late mother. We'd get into stupid discussions like who would win, Darth Vader or Batman, etc. It was just fun times to us, even though the conversations were stupid. The sun had started to go down and the shine of the sparkling water would look like crystal. The temperature started to drop, and that was when we knew it was time to go back. As we were packing up, I was mentioning a memory while laughing, and I asked my brother a question. I repeated myself. "Did you hear me? Hey!" I straightened myself out and looked at my brother while he stared across to the left side of the river, and he mutters, "You see that? Over there." "See what? You drunk already or what?" I laughed and looked at the direction he was looking at, and maybe, roughly about 80 yards away, we see a figure standing on a 20-foot cliff, just behind a few trees. It looked like a man, but the head looked smaller and body was thin, really thin. It shuffled to the side a bit out of sight. "What the hell is that?" he whispered. "Like hell I'd know." I replied back as I quickly reached into my backpack and pulled out my small pair of binoculars. Looking at this thing was something I had never seen before, especially with the view I had. This thing was gazing over the water, shuffling behind the trees. The head looked like a man, but more like egg and smaller than any human head. This thing wasn't human at all. I handed my brother the binoculars, giving him a better look, and he lets out this kind of horrific gasp and lowered the binoculars. "It's looking at us. It sees us." The eyes started to glow a ruby red-like color, which was really noticeable. This thing then proceeded to near the edge of the cliff, never taking its gaze off of us, and it jumps. Large gray/black bat-like wings spread out from what looked like from its back and glided away from us over the water. We watched this thing fly at a distance and take a left turn past the trees. We both looked at each other in silence and quickly started packing the rest of our belongings and made our way back to the trails and to the cabin. We heard stories about this kind of creature in the area, but never in our lives we thought we would see anything like it. We've been back to the same spot a few times since then. We even inspected where it stood, hoping we would catch this creature on camera, but to no avail. He knows what he saw and so do I, but we both deny ourselves to mention what it really was. Cornfield by ShawtyTheOfficial. Me and my uncle, let's say his name is Uncle Michael, go on a trip every summer because since my mom had me at 17, we've always been pretty close. I had to be about 15 years old at the time and just about to start my freshman year when we decided to go to Illinois, many cornfields of course. It had been getting late and we had just gotten to the motel. My uncle has always been pretty cheap and had a friend that worked there, so it was basically some cheap-ass place in the middle of nowhere. Surrounding the motel was a cornfield and a small lake. But that was it. We checked into our room and tried going to bed about 5 minutes after we had my uncle already snoring. Meanwhile, I couldn't fall asleep, so I figured I needed some air. I got up and grabbed our key and went down to the front lobby. Man, was that place sketchy as hell. I didn't see anyone at the front desk, so I just walked out and sat on the curb out front. It was hot as hell, but I'm pretty sure that didn't make a difference considering the fact that they didn't have air conditioning. I looked out at the little opening of the pathway that led to the lake. Out on the other side of the lake I saw something come out of the corn stalks, and at first I thought it was some sort of animal because it was on all fours, but then the figure grew tall, and if that wasn't a kangaroo in Illinois, then I was pretty sure it was some creep or something. I knew he had seen me because the lot was lit and there was only 3 cars. I then began to see the figure step into the water, going deeper until it seemed to be swimming toward the opening. I ran inside and went to my room as fast as I could because I couldn't tell if I was hallucinating or I was seriously gonna die. I looked out the window of my room and saw that the figure was stepping out from the water and onto the pathway. At this point I wake my uncle up, completely flipping out. I kept looking through the window watching, waiting for him to make it into the light. When the man did come into light, I could see his features and sopping wet hair. He looked at my motel room and saw I was watching, and went back on all fours and back into the cornfield. We talked to the front desk in the morning, and turns out the guy was just some homeless guy who did a lot of drugs that was living in the cornfield. Man, did that scare the shit out of me.